gosh, the weather is terrible today.
I know, this weather's crazy. I heard we're under a tornado warning.
A tornado? No way, quick, turn on the radio.
Newsflash, I'm Rick Tamlin here with your weather update. All of Douglas County is under a tornado warning until 1:30 p.m. today. Please remain indoors, take cover, and if you are good at creating mental images in your mind as you read or hear something with great imagery, then enjoy this song.
Really do come true. Someday I'll wish upon a star and wake up where the clouds are far behind me, where troubles melt like lemon drops away above the chimney tops. That's
God, I love good imagery.
Yeah, me too. Except, I hate lemon drops.
Imagery is defined as a sensory description used to help a reader create a vivid mental picture of the work's content. Now, just to be clear here, even though the word imagery has image in it, the definition says that these are sensory descriptions, which means that they could appeal to any of the five senses: touch, taste, sound, smell, or sight. Hey, without imagery, literature would read more like a textbook or a police report. All of the facts, none of the flavor. Effective imagery invites readers into the poem or story by capturing the subtleties of what's going on so the reader can have that same experience, moment, or feeling that the author is describing for themselves as they go through the work. People in everyday life have to use imagery in order to allow others to understand where they're coming from. Good imagery is just a part of effective communication as we try to relay how something looked, felt to be there, or the sound maybe that took place during that time. You're going to need to use imagery in order to capture that experience for the person that's listening. You'll hear imagery used in conversation most routinely when you hear the phrase, "you shoulda," coming before it. Let's go through a few examples so you can see what I mean. You should have seen how bad the weather was that day. The wind was blowing the rain sideways, and then I walked through the yard and my feet sank into the ground. This is a great example of imagery, given that you get a chance to see the rain coming in sideways, and if you've ever walked out in the yard when it's been saturated with water, you know how awful it is to feel your feet start to get wet in that moment. Here's another example. You should have been there for her guitar solo. Her fingers were flying across the fretboard, and the sound had the whole place mesmerized. If you've ever been to a great concert, you know that getting a chance to watch somebody just absolutely shred is just incredible. And so this imagery here talks about the way in which her fingers looked as it was moving across the guitar and the reaction the audience had to her impressive performance. You should have tried that ice cream. The cookie dough chunks were oversized and still soft. You could literally smell the cookie dough when it was still in the bowl on the counter. The imagery in that example makes me hungry for a little bit of ice cream. I love cookie dough ice cream, especially when the pieces are big and they're still moist. And there's such an anticipation that comes with just smelling that cookie dough ice cream coming out of the bowl before you get your first bite and are able to taste it. We're appealing here to your sight, to your sense of taste, and also to your sense of smell. So as you come across more of these "you shoulda" comments in your conversations in life, listen for more great imagery. Now, it's important for you to know that before we get started, even though imagery is one of our literary devices, just like simile or metaphor, it actually can encompass these other terms. What I mean is to say that similes or metaphors or examples of personification, hyperbole, could all help to create the imagery in a work. And so just because you see a metaphor or a simile in a poem does not mean that it can't be imagery, because it is that other thing. If you're confused about what I mean, I'm going to show you an example here in the poem by Adrienne Rich entitled "Diving into the Wreck." That was bad. That was real bad. Let's go to the poem. Okay, we're going to go through an excerpt from Adrienne Rich's poem "Diving into the Wreck" and look at the imagery she creates for readers as she describes how a diver makes his or her way off the boat, down a ladder, and into the water. I go down, rung after rung, and still the oxygen immerses me. The blue light, the clear atoms of our human air. I go down, my flippers cripple me. I crawl like an insect down the ladder, and there is no one to tell me where the ocean will begin. Now this is a great example of imagery that Adrienne Rich has put together in this poem. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at the different pieces of imagery and try to determine which sense she was trying to appeal to with that description. This portion of the poem is detailing the diver's transition from above the water to being submerged in it. And so details like the oxygen immerses me, the blue light, the clear atoms of our human air, these lines all help create a visual image for the reader of the atmosphere above the water, with its blue skies and everything covered in light. I could also argue that it's a bit of a tactile or touch sensory description here as well, if you find yourself actually feeling the lightness of being immersed in clear atoms and light. I say this primarily because it starkly contrasts to the atmosphere described underwater in the next stanza, which we don't have included here, but you'll have to trust me on that one. Next, the diver describes the crippling feeling of walking down a ladder with flippers on, and for the reader, this description evokes an awkward and unsteady feeling. The very next line then complements this feeling with a strong visual created by a simile. I crawl like an insect down the ladder. By stacking the example of imagery and playing upon multiple senses, Adrienne Rich is able to truly bring the subtleties of this moment to life. That's all for our example in poetry. Let's go to the recap. Imagery is defined as a sensory description used to help a reader create a vivid mental picture of the work's content. Also remember, the imagery encompasses much more than what you're just able to see. It's touch, taste, sight, smell, and sound. Also remember that other literary devices can help to establish the imagery in a poem, so don't be surprised if you see a simile or a metaphor contributing to the imagery in a work. Thanks for learning about imagery with me today, and happy imagery hunting!